Well, this is the one thing I have to do is record. So I'm done.
Yeah. Well, I have been in a podcast interview before where about 10, 15 minutes in, the host was like, "Oh, I forgot to record. Can we just do all that again?" Always happens.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Maybe you know what? I'll send you my.
You send me an email, a different email address, and I'll forward this to that.
Sounds good. It's pretty much the same email address, but backwards at Gmail. So I threw it in the chat there. So. Oh, hold on. Maybe I just got your.
Oh, something. I
just got the slides.
Right, here you go.
Yeah. It came through as a PDF, though.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, can you share a PDF like on full screen or something? That's fine.
Yeah,
because it's a Google slide otherwise. Or the other thing I could do, I guess I could give. Oh, is it hosted? I don't know. If you've got a PDF and you can share it full screen, that would also work.
Okay, I could do that.
I've had this before where I was teaching with clients and they have like super locked down systems, so I don't get like access to the chat or to the screen share, nothing. So I've had to work around this kind of thing.
Okay, cool. Let me share my screen and then we'll get into it.
Cool. I think there's a way to go full screen on PDFs. I don't really know. Oh, because it opens it in. It opened it in the browser.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe I can do that. Let me
Well, let's see if that makes a difference. Yeah. I just gonna open it. Is there a full screen option somewhere? If not, what I can also do is I can just give you access to the Google Slides directly. Why don't I do that?
Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna.
Okay. So hopefully I should get an email that I shared. Oh, that's a good ping sound. So try that, and that you should hopefully can open that in directly in Google Slides, and then just like, does it let you slideshow it?
I'm not seeing them.
Because
I can go through. I mean, that might be as good as we'll, or maybe I need to sign in.
You shouldn't need to. Oh, maybe I can make you. Hang on. Let me make you an editor. See if that makes a difference.
That's actually big enough.
Is that big enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And
not the ideal interface for presenting slides, but that's fine.
It works.
I've done. Yeah, it works exactly. I gave a talk at a festival in like a conference in London, and the laptop didn't connect to the screen at all. So it was actually my co-host and I from the podcast. We gave a talk together, and we just had to do it from our laptop. Like no one could see any of the slides. We were going through it. So I've done worse.
Technology.
I've done worse than present off this interface. So that's fine. Okay. All right. Well, hi everyone. Well, thanks for coming. I know this is like early morning where all of you are. So yeah, I usually give this. Well, I give versions of this talk at different institutions. I always call it my data pipeline, little data pun. Yeah, I don't know if there's a full. I don't know if you can view slideshow. Yeah, view slideshow. Try that. View. Go back to the view menu.
Oh, review
slideshow.
Okay.
Oh, look at that.
Cool.
Super professional now.
Oh my goodness.
We'll just cut all that bit from the recording, and then it'll look super smooth. Yeah. So yeah, hi everyone. So just the next slide's a quick little intro about me, just so you know like the context of who I am and why I'm here. these days I call myself a data generalist because I've had lots of job titles over the years and I didn't really like any of them. So I made one up for myself because I've done like different things and I just work with data and I do different things with data. And so I don't like getting any more specific than that because it limits all the fun opportunities that come my way. Although mostly these days what I do is I do sort of education. So I design and deliver various like data themed boot camps, short courses, anything from a half-day workshop to like a 10-week part-time data science accelerator. So I do all sorts of levels of training, mostly for corporate clients. But I do a lot of like sort of engagement talks where I go to universities and other similar groups like this and just have a little chat, tell you a little bit about my like real world experience and sort of tell you a bit about the gap between what you learn in the classroom and what actually happens in the real world. Originally, I was a software developer. I'll talk you through briefly like my career path, just not because I like talking about myself so much, but because I think it's interesting to see all the different paths into data science. And mine is just one of many possibilities. And I've got sort of two main projects on the go as well. This year, I'm sort of 80% of the way finishing a book for Manning, which is coming out this year. It's called Solve Any Data Analysis Problem, and it's a collection of practice projects that are all informed by like real world things that I've done, and they're sort of much more real world-y type projects than the kind of stuff that we can teach in a classroom. And I always thought there was a gap between what people learn and you go in a classroom, learn about analyzing data, and they give you like, here's a thing to analyze the survivors of the Titanic. You're like, okay, that's a really interesting problem for historic reasons maybe, but it's not going to get you a job. It's not going to help you learn what data science projects look like in the real world. So most of what I do, like when I speak and when I talk and give presentations and things, it's all about sort of the real world aspect. And as Jonathan said, I co-host a podcast called Half Stack Data Science, which is all about data science, but like the realities of it in the sort of business world rather than what you might read about the hype. Yeah, so we're currently talking to like various educators in the data space, which has been really interesting and eye-opening to see what people actually teach and what educators think that people should be learning. So that's been very interesting. You can listen to that, wherever you listen to podcasts. Oh, we've lost the screen. You've got, oh, there we go. Maybe that one. There we go. You're on mute, Jonathan. Okay. Yeah, we can move on. I need like a clicky thing. That'd be cool. Thanks. So the plan for this session is really kind of loose. I've got some things to talk through, but it would be great, if you have any questions at any point, just interrupt me. I do this when I teach as well. Like I don't want to, it doesn't have to be a lecture style. I much prefer if it's interactive. So if there's any follow-up questions or anything tangential, any questions that you have at all, just come off mute and ask. It's much more fun. So I'll just tell you a little bit about like how I got into a data career, just for context more than anything. And I've got some case studies for like actual projects that I worked on that I can talk you through a bit so you can see the kinds of things that sort of data people get up to in the sort of messy world of business. And then that's sort of peppered with bits of things that I wish I knew back then, and hopefully that will be useful. And then we can, leave it open for a Q&A at the end. But it's very loose. I've got some slides to talk through, but if there's anything else that comes up, any other questions, please do ask them. So we can move on. Oh, I put all those little bullet points in because it was going to be animated, but we don't need that. So yeah, so I started off as I said, as a software developer. That was my sort of entry into the workforce, really. I sort of did a computer science kind of degree. It was more focused on programming video games, actually. I never got into that industry, but I learned to code and I really enjoyed it. And sort of about a few years into my first software role, I ended up being the data team in the company I worked for. We didn't have a dedicated data team, so I had to do all the internal reporting as well as my like developer job. But I really enjoyed it because the reporting part was like actually answering business questions that people actually had day to day, and I could answer data. And eventually I realized that's actually more interesting to me than writing more code, because writing code was like, okay, we're going to add some buttons to this website, and the only time you ever get feedback from people is if it doesn't work. Whereas if you actually help them out with their problem, with their clients' questions, by actually pulling the right data, that's, you know, a lot more impactful. At least that's what I found. And so, you know, and I was reading about it, and turned out it was called this thing called data science, which was going to change the world. And so I thought, yeah, that sounds good. That's what I want to do. So I actually did a master's degree in data science. It was one of the first master's degrees in the UK at the time, dedicated to that topic. And that was great, but it was very academic. So it was a lot of formulas and a lot of like the underlying maths, but not a lot about how to actually do it in the real world. And so when I got my first data scientist job afterwards, actually my first proper job out of the degree was, I got hired by Sean, who's my co-host on the podcast. And we started the podcast because we were having these conversations that, like, this isn't the data science people told us it was going to be. This is a lot more messy and difficult. So maybe we should tell people about that. And so, yeah, in my 4 years sort of as a data scientist, I sort of learned a lot about how to try and make this happen in business. And it's very different from what you get told in a classroom. And then sort of COVID came along and you know, upended everything. And I got a lot of opportunities to teach remotely, various data science courses. And so I grabbed that, and I've been doing that ever since. So that's sort of my current path into data. So mine was from a very technical standpoint, which is, I think, based on what I've talked to people, it's more rare. More people come in from like other, you know, maybe STEM degrees, that kind of thing. But, you know, it's absolutely possible to have a technical person retrained to be a data person. Yeah, Jonathan, we can go.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Sorry,
Crystal.
I can't interact with the chat for some reason.
Yeah,
so.
I can't see the chat either. Okay. I think Jonathan put something in the chat, but I can't see it anywhere. So yeah, just come off mute. Yeah, it's fine, Crystal.
Yeah.
Hi.
Well, hi, I'm Crystal. I am in the Doctorate of Information Technology program at CityU, and I have been a computer science educator for 20 years. My bachelor's is in computer science. And so I'm really curious, because I teach kind of the intro level of CS and helping coach students on like what path to take and what skills are more like what skills to focus on. I'm curious about, since you came from kind of that software development side, like what are your most transferable skills into data science, or the things that make you, what are your strengths as a data scientist from that CS background?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. I think the fact that, you know, I've seen different programming languages, so I can learn technical topics pretty quickly. Like once you've learned 2 or 3 programming languages, even at a, you know, intermediate level, it's much easier to pick up something else. So, you know, if I was going to a company and they used a different stack from what I'm used to, I think I could catch up pretty quickly. Whereas people who are not from a coding background, I think that would be a big ask. Like, you know, they would be comfortable in their single stack that they use to learn data analysis, but transferring it to some other stack, I think that's probably more difficult if you don't come from that background. And I think just like not being scared of writing little applications. Like one of the things I used to love doing is every time there's a bit of analysis and I wanted to present, I would like make a little application out of it, like a web application or a little desktop thing with buttons on it, and just to make it a bit more fully fledged as software. And that's not something usually people ask for, or it's not something they think they can ask for. So you bring that capability, and it really enhances the data team if you have someone who's more comfortable doing it. Luckily, we used to have quite a sort of prototyping approach in my team that I was in. So if somebody wanted to just build something over the course of a few days, they got the time to do it alongside their work. So we got the opportunity to play around with stuff. And so I did quite a lot of little prototypes, and some of them became, I've got a slide on one of them a bit later, that one of them actually became a business tool that was used, you know, daily by a whole team. And that was just because I knew how to just knock up something that, you know, that wasn't finished. It was just looked like it could be an application and get to that stage.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks. That's great, good question. Cool. Yeah, Jonathan, we can. Oh yeah, and yes, my 5-year plan is to be replaced by AI. I said that last year, and I'm not any closer yet, but maybe next year. Get an AI to do my job, and then I don't have to do anything. So yeah, this is the first case study I wanted to talk about. So this was the company I worked for was in the used car business, and we used to the company still does like run these massive used car auctions, right? So you can imagine like an aircraft hangar type building full of used cars and people literally bidding on them in an auction environment. And there are sort of three major companies in the UK that do this. And if you go on their websites, everybody has the catalog for the day of like, these are the cars that are currently for sale today at the auction, and in some kind of spreadsheet on their website. And there was someone in the finance team who was downloading these spreadsheets every day because they wanted to know, what are our competitors selling, which is a good idea, right? It's all publicly available information. And literally there was some person taking half an hour every day of their morning going and clicking some buttons to download all these spreadsheets, putting them onto some shared drive, and then realizing that actually we've got thousands of Excel files here, we don't know how to open them. So they were just sort of sitting there. And we saw an opportunity. I was like, well, I can write the code to automate this, grab those Excel sheets, save them, and then even put them into a database. So, first step for this project was finding that we needed to do some automation. And then put all this data into a database. And it also meant that if the finance person was off sick, it still got done, right? Whereas we'd have gaps in the data whenever that person wasn't working. And so, Jonathan, if you just go a couple of bullets more. Yeah, so I cleaned all that data and surfaced it via Tableau. So there are these dashboards which showed you things like, the number of cars our competitors are selling over time, what our market share looks like versus our competitors, because no one really had a numerical answer, like an actual measured answer to that. So I was able to do that in the dashboard. And then, yeah, we found some interesting insights. One of the things that no one realized is that when all these auction houses shut down, obviously over COVID in the lockdown period, when the restrictions were lifted, one of our competitors, the smallest one, was actually doing a lot more business than they did before as a sort of percentage of the market, and no one realized. So that was something we could actually look into, and people were then scrambling to have a look at what's going on there, which wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't done this, if I hadn't written that initial script. And then just I think there's a final bullet point there. The point of this project, and I give this to like people who are on machine learning PhD programs, and I tell them like, this project didn't use any of that fancy predictive stuff. It was just grab some data from here, move it to here, put it on the screen. But because no one else could do it, it's actually a game changer if you can do something like this. Although naively you might just call this project nothing but data cleaning. I generally have an issue with that phrase because people think data cleaning is just, oh, this date is in the wrong format, I need to fix that with some code. But actually it's getting different data sources, making sure they work together, putting them in the same place, actually understanding what's in the data. There's a lot of work in that before you can surface it on the dashboard to people. And so, yeah, my next slide, I think, is sort of an aside. There's a really good article. Maybe we can share the PDF slides or something afterwards on Randy's blog. It's a guy called Randy Au, who's a data, can't remember his job title. He works at Google. He's like a quantitative researcher of some kind. He has a really good newsletter. And anyway, he had this post about data cleaning is analysis. It's not grunt work, to try and break this sort of stigma we have in the business about like, oh, we have to do this data cleaning. It's so boring. We want to do fun stuff. But actually, data cleaning is really the crucial thing that we'll end up doing.
I actually like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy prepping data.
Yeah, I do as well. And that's why I never understood, like, the meme was always, oh, 80% of data science is cleaning data, and then the other 20% is complaining about having to do that. And it's like, well, that's not right, because this is actually really important. Someone has to do it, and it counts as analysis. It is absolutely part of the analysis process.
I agree.
I'm glad there's other people. I think it's fun. And then Jonathan, if we
do too.
Sorry, go on, Jan.
I do too.
Yeah, good. So yeah, and so 80% of cleaning data doesn't mean that it's just, oh no, somebody typed the date in wrong, we have to fix it. It's actually understanding what's in the data, It is detective work. It is proper analyst work. And I think as my last bullet point is like, this might be your most valuable contribution as a data person, is taking this pile of stuff that no one's dared to look at before and cleaning it up properly, documenting what's in it, understanding what's possible with the available data, all that kind of stuff that we would as an industry lump under this phrase called data cleaning, as if it was just sort of janitorial grunt work that we have to do. But no, it is actually really important. Anyway, that's something I learned sort of through the ages, and I tell all the students. And the people who think they're going to be building fancy machine learning models all day are the most surprised by this, usually. They're like, no, the data's already clean, isn't it? It's like, no.
No, it never is.
It's not.
That's funny.
So yeah, and so that's why this project was just taking 3 different types of spreadsheets from our systems and from 2 competitor systems, and like matching up which column is which column, what columns do they have in common, what don't they have in common, what can we actually compare against all the competitors across market share, vehicle types, all that kind of stuff. So, we could actually do things with it. And yeah, you might call it data cleaning, but it was very, very interesting and valuable. Okay, Jonathan, we can move on. Yeah, so the other one, so just to talk about like a more predictive thing, because I like to poo-poo machine learning as a thing in the industry because so many problems don't actually need it. But it does come up a lot. Obviously, there's a reason why it's even a thing, is because it has value. And so in this sort of used car auction environment, one of the things that we quite quickly identified would be useful to know is whether a car is going to sell at an auction or not before the auction happens, right? Because what we would have is the vendors who would send their cars for us to sell in this auction would complain when we didn't sell one of the cars. And so we thought, well, it would be great if we had something to preemptively have a conversation to say, no, you're sending bad cars, they need to be fixed up, or these are not the right buyers, we need to move this car to a different auction or something like that. And so we thought we'd build a predictive model that literally predicts the probability that a car is going to sell at auction. And so we thought, well, we'll do that, and we'll call it an early warning system. And then people can log in, look at the upcoming sales for the next day, the next few days, maybe a week in advance, and start having those conversations with clients to say, oh, look, we found some cars that we don't think are going to sell because of X, Y, Z reasons. So I built a very quick sort of basic logistic regression model. It had 6 variables in it. It was super simple, but it worked for like 70% of the cases. I surfaced it via Tableau, so people could log in and literally review all the cars for sale with a sort of estimate next to it of like which ones are the ones that are not likely to sell. So this should be a sort of success story for machine learning, right? If we go to the next couple of bullet points, it was successful from a machine learning point of view. And if you look at like the accuracy metrics and false positives, false negatives, all that sort of technical stuff, it was a successful project. The first iteration did a pretty good job at finding the cars that like wouldn't sell. But when we actually piloted this with a client, there were some issues, and one of them was that our own team didn't enter the vehicle details into the system until like the night before an auction happened. So if we have a predictive model that says, oh, the auction's happening in 10 minutes, you're not going to sell these cars, that's not useful, right? We can't have those conversations. So we said, okay, well, for this to work, the ops teams have to enter the data like 3 or 4 days at least before an auction happens. And then the ops team was like, no, we're understaffed, we can't do that. So, okay, so there's operational reasons why that model was never going to be used internally. And then we also tried to pilot it with some customers. And one of the biggest recommendations that the system comes out with is if your reserve price is too high, right? If you don't want to sell your car until you hit an unreasonably high number, that's like a pretty good indicator that your car is not going to sell. And so we thought, well, great, we can recommend that to finally we have some quantitative backing for telling people to lower their reserve prices. And then the customer turned around and was like, oh no, our CFO mandates that the reserve price has to be some percentage of the value. So we're not allowed to change the reserve price. And so we're like, okay, so we have a predictive model that can only make a prediction the night before an auction happens, not enough time to do anything about it. And any post hoc recommendations we can make, the client's not going to act on it. So that we had to sort of can that entire project at that point. We learned a lot of lessons, including like, don't build anything until you're sure how the business is going to use it, and how it's going to fit in operationally, down to like who's going to enter that data and when. We learned that one the hard way. So yeah, I think there's so the failure here was nothing to do with our ability to train a machine learning model. It was everything to do with the organization and the culture, and the levers that our clients could or couldn't pull. So yeah, one of the things I tell people is, the technical aspects of data science is not easy. Like, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of coding to learn. There's a lot of, machine learning frameworks and algorithms and things to learn. So it's not trivial, but it's very rare that the technical reasons are the ones that make a project fail. It's all to do with everything else. It's all to do with, how you can fit that predictive model into the business. And again, that's quite surprising for people who think they're just going to be building machine learning models and then immediately make money for their company with it, because that's just not not how it happens. And then I've got another one about a recommendation engine. This was more of a success story. So this was two of us, myself and another data scientist together. We built this recommendation engine. Again, if we have a couple of bullet points there. So one of the things that we noticed is that actually, if we build a model that is able to tell how similar two cars are, then we could use that for quite a lot of different things. So we built this underlying model. And so what we did is we built some recommendation engines to say, okay, here's our existing buyer base. Here's what they've bought from us before. But actually, we've got some other stock that's similar in some way to the stuff they've already bought. And so why don't we, just like Amazon recommends you more products, just like Netflix recommends you more shows to watch, why don't we do that with cars and just give them, here's a bunch more cars that you could buy from us, and here's the specific time and place that we're going to be selling them in the next few days or weeks. And then we could also use that model and flip it and say, here's some cars we have for sale. Which buyers should we be phoning up to come to this auction? Because the buyer team were desperate to get people in the room. And so we're like, well, we have a database of people and what they bought. We can surely identify people who we should be ringing to say, look, we've got a bunch of Volkswagens on sale. You should come and buy them. And then the other thing we could do is also suggest different auction locations for our existing buyers, because we had all these different locations around the country. And we could say, look, based on the stock that you buy from us, there's actually one, it's an hour drive from here, but we sell cars that are a lot more similar to the kind of stuff that you want. So why don't you check that out as well? So just by having this sort of car similarity engine, pun not intended, but there you go. We had this sort of similarity model. We could reframe it in these different ways and build these. Again, these were just Tableau dashboards that people could log into. But to recommend buyers for them, recommend cars, recommend sales for existing buyers. So lots of different ways to slice the same thing. And Jonathan, and this was used by the whole buyer team daily. So this was actually a thing that we built that finally people were using day to day, and we could sort of quantify the amount of value that brought, because we could say, the buyer team would try and record, oh, I upsold this other thing to the client based on this dashboard, and we sort of tried to keep a tally of that, and as our sort of what business was generated by the fact that we created this recommendation engine. And again, the key thing here was that the technical challenge was obviously not trivial. We had to build the similarity engine, we had to build these dashboards, but the real challenge and the real success of this was listening to what the buyer team were saying and identifying a solution for them, just based on what they were saying. That no one asked us to build this. This was something that we heard by sitting in on their meetings and sort of finding this underlying need. And so we did a lot more of that. That's one of the things we learned is just talk to the people in the business, and don't try and immediately to sell them on the cool stuff you can do, but just listen to what they do and what their challenges are, and you'll probably identify something where you can make a difference. And so we used to do this. We used to just like ask to be invited along to team meetings and things, and we would just sit in the room, not even say anything half the time, but just make notes, and then come up with something. Another example that I built was like a lead generation sort of tool where, again, it was the same buyer team, and that what they were doing is they were driving to these different used car dealerships and talking to the dealers about our products and trying to sell them our services. And they said like, oh, what would be good is if we could make use of that time, and that person could then go visit some other clients or visit some potential clients who are not far away, or actually optimize that day. And it turns out in the UK at least, there's a database, a public database of every single company, and where they're registered and what industries, sort of what their business is. And if you download that database and you filter it to like just the businesses that work with the used car market and put them all on a map, it's really useful for people, because they can say, oh, I'm going to visit this client, but if I actually just look at this map of all the possible clients in the country, I can visit this one and this one and this one and just do some cold calling and just drop in on them. And so again, technically, that just took me identifying this problem, finding the relevant data and surfacing it on like a map visualization. But again, we wouldn't have even identified this as a thing if we hadn't just been sitting there listening to their team meeting and listening to the things that they were complaining about, like not being able to do. So again, very, very sort of human solution to a problem. Obviously, there was a technical component, but but it was the sort of human element that got it working. And yeah, so I really like this meme. It's like, anytime you think you have some kind of technical data problem, it's always a person problem deep down. It's always going to be organizational. It's always going to be to do with the people. Data projects very rarely fail because someone wasn't technically proficient enough to deliver the work. It's almost always something else. Very, very rare, unless you're working on the cutting edge of AI or whatever. It's not going to be a technical issue. It's going to be a person issue, people issue. Okay, yeah, next. So, and then I've just got some sort of general advice slides about how to keep learning data science after formal education. And it's sort of how I wish somebody had told me when I was sitting on my master's degree and like going through formulas and proofs and things and thinking like, is this really the job I want to do? I don't know. I don't want to be a mathematician. It turned out, I've never derived a formula at work. It's very rare to have to do that. So luckily those days were over when I graduated.
Can I ask
yes.
a question before you move on? Sorry.
No, please. Please do.
In your examples that you gave, it sounds like both of them, as you said, like human-centered, like there were things that were going on that the team heard, or pain points that the team heard other folks saying. I'm wondering how prevalent that kind of bottom-up solution making happens in the industry versus a leader giving you a directive of, that kind of, they haven't uncovered the people part yet.
Yeah, no, again, that's a great question. If you've got good data leadership, which again, what that even means, I think the industry is not clear on. So I think companies are not got that in place. Then they can have those conversations at a strategic level, and then those can trickle down, and then the work that you do is always going to be valuable. That would be nice. We had some restructuring, and eventually we sort of got sat under the board member who was responsible for strategy was the one who was feeding us work, and so then we noticed our work was, we noticed work coming to us that was immediately impactful. So that sort of top level restructuring did help. But luckily, we got some leeway to do some of that more, as you say, bottom up kind of work, because that's where you're actually talking to the potential users of these things. And just to give an example, the first thing we ever worked on as a data team was something that came top down. The board decided that, okay, we got all these data people, they need to make money for the business. So they actually, we have to build some kind of data product that we're going to sell to people. The first project we worked on it for months. It was supposed to be like you could put in a registration of a car on an app, and it tells you all sorts of insights about the market for that kind of car. Again, the technical feasibility of it was fine. I was the one who prototyped it. We proved that we could answer some interesting questions with the data that we had, and then no one could sell this to anyone. And so, it was great. Somebody had an idea that came from the top down. We built this. We had some really ambitious revenue targets to hit with this thing. Obviously, we weren't selling it. We had some salespeople trying to sell this, but it's actually very hard to sell a data-driven product to a used car dealer, because a used car dealer doesn't want to believe that you can tell them anything they don't already know. And I'm sure there's a lot of industries like that where people are skeptical about data and data science and whatnot. So yeah, that was really hard, and we couldn't hit any of our revenue targets. And then people realized, okay, maybe we need a different approach. And that's when we sort of got taken apart a bit as a data team and sat under strategy. And luckily, we were able to do a lot more useful stuff. So I think it's a mix. It also depends on the kind of company. I think for startups, it's a lot more top down, where they have specific things they want to do. And for companies like the one I worked in, like the one that most people kind of work in, companies that have been around forever before data science was a thing, and you try and tack that on at the end, then it's going to be whatever you can get working. And so this bottom up thing you can work. If you get the leeway to do it, it's very effective. So it's a very long answer, but I hope that was.
No, that was great. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, those conversations were the best, because if you found the right people internally, they would keep coming back to you. And so this buyer team, the head of the buyer team, eventually would just come to us directly and say, I think I'd like something like this. And then we'd have a conversation, we'd do something, and it was much more fruitful. After that, you prove to them once that you can be useful, and they keep coming back. That's the best kind of relationship to foster. So just some sort of tidbits about what I think about learning data science, Jonathan. So this was on Twitter a couple of years ago. It's not last October. I think it was even the October before. Anyway, it was like, what would you do if you went back and had to start learning again? And what Ben here said is, like, I would just learn Python, but you can replace that with any tool, like a tool that can analyze data, and then just find problems and solve them. Solve problems that people care about. That's all that matters. Don't buy 27 textbooks of algorithms. Just try and solve problems, and learn how to tell them how you've solved the problem. And again, it's that human element. If you're able to show people the value of your work, it doesn't matter if the technical side was like a bar chart. It doesn't matter how technical the solution is. And then just being able to solve a problem eventually to some degree is very useful. So I like his list, because that's probably not far off what I would say, is be proficient in some technical tool. Coming from a coding background, for me, it was easy enough for that to be Python, but we had some Tableau power users on our team who couldn't code, but they were amazing at Tableau. So whatever the tool is, just have a tool and then use it to solve problems. And then you'll learn everything else that you need sort of along the way automatically. So that's I think a useful thing. And then the other thing that I think is quite important is not to be overwhelmed, or to try not to be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of stuff there is out there to learn. Like, obviously you'll never learn all of it. And now with AI, things are changing daily, so I'm not even kidding myself that I can stay on top of it. And what I found is a very useful approach is much more breadth first, is like having awareness of everything that's out there, but not necessarily being able to do it immediately is actually really useful, because you might encounter a problem in the future where it's like, oh, I read about a thing that can do that. I've never tried it myself, but it sounds like it would be appropriate for this problem. And then you learn all the details just for that project. It's much more pragmatic, right, than trying to learn everything before you even attempt your first data project. Yeah, Jonathan. Yeah, so I found, at least, again, this is sort of skewed towards how I like to operate. As I said, I'm a generalist, so I like this, being aware of lots of things, but having, not being a deep expert in anything. So not saying I'm this kind of expert or that kind of expert. I was just sort of awareness of everything, and then drill down as needed. And then, yeah, just being able to learn on the job is much more important than having everything up front. Because if you learn everything up front, you'll spend years not doing anything, and you might not use most of it. And so that can be quite discouraging. So you might have seen this idea that people can be T-shaped, at least talk about it, at least in data science, where you have a sort of awareness of everything at the top, and then you maybe have like a, expertise in something that you're really interested in and drill down into that, but not try and learn the whole thing. Certainly not before doing your first projects, right? I get students who are like, oh, I need to learn this and this and this before I can build something. You're just like, no, just build something, and you'll see where your gaps are, and you'll fill them, and then you've got a project under your belt, and then you can keep going. Much more important and much more relevant, and just keeps you more sane, because it is so easy to get lost in all the topics that are out there. Yeah, Jared, right. Yeah, and so just this is my one piece of advice for everyone is just do things, just like build stuff, solve problems, and it can be for yourself. Like a lot of my data students on the courses where they did a capstone project at the end, a lot of them I would always tell them, just forget about doing something for work at this point, just do something that solves a problem. And so I had people trying to predict the winner of tennis matches so they can bet money and try and actually win some money on it. There are people optimizing their fantasy football teams, all sorts. Just as long as you're solving a real problem for someone, and that someone can be you, then you're practicing the right things, right? Because then you have a stakeholder, and again, it can be yourself, but you understand the problem and you understand what a good solution would look like. And so when you've succeeded. That's really important to have that. And again, applying for jobs, having a portfolio where you can just show how you solve problems. Really great conversations that you can have in interviews is if you can say, oh, I did this project end to end, here's what I learned from it, and here's how I solved this problem. That's really useful. One of the things that I was doing as one of the last things I did in my job was help find my replacement. And so I was helping my manager sift through CVs. And yeah, really almost no one had any project that they could pull out and talk about, which I thought was very surprising in a career or in a job that is so hands-on and so sort of solution-oriented. I thought it was quite surprising. So, ever since then, I've been telling people just have something, one or two pieces of analyses, PDF that you can send to someone, like a report detailing what you did and how you solved the problem, and specifically, what the problem was and why anyone should care and what the value of your contribution was. Very rare for some reason among candidates, and so it's an easy way to stand out. And this life hack I learned, I think I mentioned this before, that just building things that no one explicitly asked for is very useful, because people don't often know what they can ask for. And so people are not going to come to you and say, I want a data tool that does this, 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 and all you have to do is follow the steps and you build it. You sort of have to identify the underlying problems and then just solve them, even if no one's asking you to do it. Because once you have a solution in front of people, then they can say, oh, okay, I can see how this is really handy. Now you can spend the 3 weeks it takes to do it properly. So, have a little prototype that looks like a final thing, even if it doesn't fully work, just to sort of showcase the possibilities. Then that gives you the buy-in to sort of do it properly as a real project. That's a mindset that's very useful in industry. And then, the other thing I found, people talk about imposter syndrome in data science. I found it's quite liberating to think of yourself as an imposter anyway. Like being in a meeting, I would always try to ask the sort of the obvious questions. And this is something I tell people to do. It's like when business people are in there with you and they're throwing around terms, like one of the examples that we had was conversion, right? Very important in the auction business. What percentage of conversion did you have in an auction? Which is literally what percentage of the cars could you sell on the day? And so they were always really obsessed with conversion. We had a bunch of reports that showed conversion going up and down over time and stuff. And we had a meeting. We're like, okay, well, I actually need someone to define conversion properly. And especially they had this idea called first time conversion. And, we had like 3 different definitions come from people. And it's like, well, we can't build you a report if you haven't even defined the concept, right? And that required, again, us being in that meeting and just asking a question that seemed obvious, like, can you please tell us what conversion means? And yeah, that's quite liberating to just ask those questions, because you'll get very interesting answers. So yeah, being a beginner the whole time is actually, I think, quite a good mindset shift. And just be like really curious about the industry as well. When I was a software developer, you didn't necessarily have to know about how the business operates, because you got a bunch of coding tasks to do and you could do them and then go home. But with data work, it's like you have to make an impact to the business somehow. And the way to do that is to understand how the business operates. How does it make its money? Who are the customers? How do the customers make money? That kind of stuff. And the more you know about the industry as a whole, the more valuable you will be as a data person. I found, like, I had no knowledge of the used car market, but I had to learn quite a lot in that job. And the more I knew, the more useful I could be in conversations, because I knew what they were talking about. And yeah, so as I said, just questioning the basics, like, why do you even need to know this? And then eventually my manager got very good at just like asking people, okay, you said you want a report that does X, tell me how you're going to use it and what you're going to do with that information. And sometimes the answers to those were so bad that we would say, well, then we won't do this. We won't complete this request. We're closing that ticket. Which sounds harsh, but we want to be a value generating machine. We want to do valuable work. So just asking questions like, okay, why do you need to know this? What are you going to do with this information? Can be very liberating. And again, that requires you to sort of get past this idea that you have to be the expert all the time. Yeah, there's an article, there's a Guardian had a sort of article about this, about being an absolute beginner for life. I think it's quite a nice mindset to have, and useful for data work. And then, yeah, again, this meme of like, oh, so data science is just solving business problems. Like, yep, that's all it is. You'll find data science varies a lot if you start looking at like job descriptions, and start reading articles from what Facebook, or I guess now Meta. So maybe we're not supposed to call them FANG. Maybe it's Mang now. I don't know, because they're Meta, not Facebook. But anyway, those big companies, right, who get most of the lion's share of the article space. Like, you read about all the cool stuff they're doing at Google. Most companies are not Google, right? So most companies don't do that kind of stuff. Most companies are like the ones I've described, where people don't really know what data science can do for them. They're a bit skeptical of it, and so you need to do different things to succeed. And just generally, like, figuring out the specific part of the data ecosystem that really excites you and optimizing for that is really good. It's a good thing to do, because otherwise, again, you will just drown in all the possible things that you could know. And yeah, it's really about the problem solving part. It's not about the specific tools. The tools will come and go, especially AI. Like this, whatever we're using now for AI is going to be obsolete in 6 months. So don't be too wedded to the tools. Worry more about the process. And that's why, like, solving problems and doing things is the best way, because the technology you actually use to solve the problem might change over time, but the process of how you solve a problem and how you think critically, and how you talk to business people, that's not going to change regardless of what the tools are. And yeah, don't be scared of AI, because it's not going to take this job away anytime soon. It is okay at automating the most basic of data tasks, but by the time you've specified the problem precisely enough that it can give you a good solution, you might as well have just written the solution yourself. At this point, I don't think analysts are going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. And just the key to everything is just to practice, just to keep doing lots of stuff, just whatever it is, just do stuff, is generally my advice. So yeah, that's sort of a brief overview of some of the things I've learned and some of the projects I've worked on. There's some ways you can get in touch. I've sent the PDF, I think, to Jonathan, so he can share that with you as well. It's got, so the links are clickable. And yeah, I'll open the floor to questions if there's anything else.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm in the data science master's program, and we have to do a capstone project. And I was wondering if you could give us some tips on how to choose a capstone project. I fully understand it needs to be a real world problem, but there's so many things. It's just overwhelming.
I would start by like identifying what interests you and like what kind of domain, what kind of industry you're interested in, and sort of narrow it down that way. A lot of the problem is a lot of these when there's a capstone project, people will just share, oh, here's 5 different websites you can go to find data sets, and off you go. Like that's not a useful thing to tell people.
No, because there's so much data out there.
Exactly. So so my advice is forget about the data to start with, is focus on a problem that you think would be interesting to solve. If it's in an industry you know well, then that's great, because you probably already know the kinds of problems that people have. It might be a problem you have. You know, another thing one of my students did once was they were like hunting for a flat to rent because their rent was going up or they had to move or something, and so they were, you know, they would compile a database of house like rentals from you know the Zillow equivalent, whatever, in the UK, and they would, you know, then have a look and try and like find areas that are, you know, that meet their requirements and, you know, have a good trade-off between, I don't know, cost and size, stuff like that. So, you know, again, they were just trying to solve a problem for themselves, but the problem came before the data. So, I mean, my first piece of advice would definitely be to find a problem first, and for just kind of forget about the data part to start with.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I did so in my master's degree, one of the things that we could do was, instead of doing like a thesis, like an academic thesis, we could do an internship at a company, and sort of submit that as a final thesis rather than a sort of academic research. That was really useful. I don't know how easy it is to find opportunities like that. We had people sourcing those internally, so we were quite lucky. But I don't know if there's anything like that, any framework like that at the university, any industry partnerships and things. That's another good way.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I would recommend that. I did mine. I did an internship, and I learned a lot from that, and it was a very useful experience, and much more useful than if I would have researched something for an academic thesis, because it was something I could talk about, you know, in future interviews and things.
Hey, David, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I came late to the
that's
meeting.
Okay. Good to see you, Nick.
Yeah, good to see you too. Finally, nice to put a face to,
exactly,
to all the email correspondence. I don't know if you talked about this or hit on this earlier in your presentation. I know you talked about building products, especially in, I don't want to say the term normal, but the vast majority of organizations out there are still uncertain about employing either data scientists or some form of data analytics to improve their organization. And one of your solutions was to start solving problems even without them asking. I did a few, or I was reading some articles where some of the ideas given were to essentially give a presentation on data science or data analytics, like, hey, this is some of the solutions I've come up with, or here's some of the capabilities that I can perform, because a lot of people are sometimes kind of scared to ask the question, like, hey, what can you do? What are your thoughts on that? Is that good? Is that bad? Do you like that idea?
Yeah, no, I like that idea. I think one of the difficulties is the fact that people don't really know what they can ask a data team to do. That's definitely something I've seen. It's like, it's only when you've built them something and you're like, oh, I didn't realize we could do that kind of thing. You know, all the way up to the CEO. We had these really kind of bizarre drop-in sessions where the CEO would be in town or something, and they would come in, and we could book a 15-minute slot to talk to them about something. Just kind of, I mean, it was kind of cool, because otherwise, you know, how are you ever going to talk to him? And so, you know, we pitched some stuff, and it would be like, you know, here's a thing we built that one of the tools we built was just, it calculates the amount of revenue or amount of sales that a client has lost by not having the right reserve price. So they're a bunch of cars that they didn't sell because they were holding out for a much higher value, which was not realistic given the market conditions.
Right.
And so then we said, okay, in that instance, you lost, the potential to sell this car. And so we added those up over the course of a year on a dashboard. And we showed that to the CEO, and he was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, can you send me some of these, because I'm talking to XYZ company soon.
Mm-hmm.
And, it would be great to put some numbers in, like, did you know you could have made X amount more money if you'd only listened to our advice? And obviously then it's about repackaging it and, not making it a blame, but making it like an opportunity, whatever, rebranding it. But just the fact that we pitched that to the CEO and he was like, oh, I didn't realize we could do that so easily. And like, that's really interesting. So yeah, just any opportunities where you can talk to people and present things is useful. So having something like that, yeah, I mean, one thing we could have done, I guess, at the time is to have some page on our company intranet or something to say, here's the data team, here's some stuff that we've done.
Right.
And we did used to hold like webinars internally and try and get people to come along, where we would just show them some of our work, but people were too busy to come to those. So usually you had to have like those more water cooler conversation types where you.
Right. That's what I was reading about, is that they would, because especially when it's in a domain that you have little information on or have never worked in before, it's going to take a while to actually build that. But
Yes.
What they were saying is that it's twofold. One, if you go to those individuals, depending on if it's a remote role or not, if you're able to like present like, hey, this is, what are you working on? Like, hey, this is what I could do for you. At the same time, you're building those connections. So it's easier if you have questions about that domain, then it's easier to facilitate that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why we used to just, as I said, we used to just like ask for invites to these various meetings that we weren't otherwise supposed to be in. And we would just sit in the corner and take notes just so we could have that opportunity. And then when there was a coffee break, you could approach someone and say, oh, by the way, we can do this thing. And
yeah,
definitely. And anything you could do with internal marketing is always so useful, because it is a question of marketing. Again, it's not a question of having the technical expertise to do something. It's a question of whether people know about it and know how to use it.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
This has been great. Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thank you all for coming out at early doors. No, it's always fun to come in, because I see this problem, this gap between academic classroom teaching and what actually happens in the industry, and I'm still so shocked and baffled by it that I just like to do whatever I can to fill that gap.
That sounds like a capstone project.
Yeah, well, exactly. Quantifying that would be interesting.
Yeah, quantifying it would be difficult, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll just mention too. Nick and I are working with a data science. This is part of this data science club event that Nick really put together. I would encourage anyone else who wants to. We're pretty much just making stuff that we want to do, but we want to definitely encourage everyone else to do the same. And whatever we can do to help you out with that, just let us know, and we can put together some stuff. I mean, So I just want to open the door. Yeah, if you want to get someone to talk to, it's a great way to network with people. If you just call people you find they're interesting, like David was so gracious to come, that we would probably not run into David in Seattle anytime soon. So this is like super exciting. So people that you're interested in, just give them a call and we can set up a meeting and just kind of, just get it going. And people respond. So that's the other thing. And then one more thing and I'll shut up. We have next Tuesday, I think it's next Tuesday, we have a guy from the Allen Institute for AI coming to talk at City U. David, you're more than welcome to go. It's a online event, or it's a mixed mode and it's open to the public. So it'll be talking about some of their AI initiatives in like monitoring like shipping and stuff. I don't know. It's going to be crazy. You should definitely come. All right, that's it.
Where do we find information on that, Jonathan?
That should be posted in your course shell.
Okay.
And then if not there, I don't think I've made it. I'll make an announcement in the Data Science Club. But if you look in there,
perfect.
that's a good place to find that information. So
Okay.
cool.
I don't think I'm a member of the Data Science Club.
Perfect time to start signing up then.
Yeah.
I agree. Where do I go do that?
You should.
We'll provide a link, or we can message you a link afterwards,
Oh,
Jan.
perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect,
it's
perfect.
just a Teams channel that we're in.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions or anything else? Anybody else would like to ask David? Awesome.
Cool. Well,
Well,
thanks
thanks
everyone.
again, David.
Well, thanks, Nick, for getting in touch. No, it's what Jonathan said, like this podcast, it was just Sean and I made something that we thought should exist because we just like put our conversations on the internet, and just it's been a nice way to meet people sometimes. So I'm very glad you got in touch.
Oh, that thing is, I love your podcast to the point where my daughter is now asking when the next episode is coming out.
Yeah, you mentioned that's great. Yeah, we're recording another one on Friday, so that'll be out soon, and then we've got another one scheduled in a couple of weeks. So we've got some good guests coming.
Awesome. Yeah, anybody else that's on the call, I definitely encourage to listen to David's podcast. They do it from a very much a tech agnostic perspective. Like they don't really go into a huge amount of coding. However, it really puts in perspective enterprise level like data science and data analytics and what you're more than likely going to be exposed to after you leave academia, should you choose to leave academia.
Well, thanks, Nick. It's very, very kind of you to say. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for turning out. This was great. Great to meet you all.
Awesome. All right. Well,
yeah, thank you.
Everyone have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks again, man, for coming. Oh, I think he locked up.